We have Jeff Laszloffy from Montana Family Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Jan, it's my pleasure to be here.
Okay. Well, our viewers may not be familiar with you and your work, so I'd like to just start with having you share a little bit about yourself and what Montana Family Foundation is all about.
You bet. Well, I'm a former state legislator, and when I left the legislature almost a decade ago, I was the Speaker Pro Tem of the House of Representatives. And so I guess I never really left politics, though. With the Montana Family Foundation, we do research, education, and advocacy for families from a Christian worldview perspective across the state. And we have an affiliated organization called the Montana Family Institute. And so our charge is to create better public policy that works well for families and for kids.
That's great. That's great. So we'd like to talk a little bit about the education piece today, and school choice is a biggie. Want to share with us a little bit some of your opinions on that?
Oh, you bet. School choice is huge, and it's growing. It's getting bigger and bigger across the United States. I don't know if everyone knows, but we have a problem in Montana, and it comes in two parts. First of all, our dropout rate. Montana's got a 20% on average dropout rate, 20% of our kids. And the second problem is, of those that actually do graduate and go on to college, average 30% of them have to take remedial classes to catch up before they can begin their normal college workload. And so we think that we can do better in education. And there are some kids that do exceedingly well in public schools. And what we're going to focus on are those that don't, those that need some help. And we believe that there need to be other options for those kids other than just a traditional public school setting. That's working well in other states. There's other states that are 20 years ahead of us on this curve. And Montana's lagging behind, but I think it's time for us to catch up.
What options do we have right now in Montana?
Well, in Montana, obviously you can send your child to a public school. And I guess I should give a disclaimer. My wife and I have 5 children, and we've had children in public school, private school, and we've homeschool. And so we call ourselves equal opportunity educators.
Okay.
And our philosophy has always been to look at the child individually and figure out what setting works best for that particular child. And it's worked well for our family, and it works well for lots of families, and we think that that's something that the state should look at also. So right now in Montana, we don't have any school choice. We're one of only 8 states left in the entire nation with no school choice. You either have the choice of a public school, a private school, or homeschool. But if you're a child that's in danger of dropping out and your parents can't afford to send you to a private school, or their life situation isn't such that they can homeschool you, then you're stuck with one option, and that's traditional public school. And if that's not working for you, you probably will wind up dropping out. So there's lots of other options that folks can look at, and we just want the legislature to take a look at those.
Sure. And can you share with us what some of the other states are doing?
Oh, absolutely. I guess the big one, and this is going to come up again this session, will be charter schools. And charter schools are a public school in every sense of the word, except that they're not under control of the local school board. They're under the control of their own charter board. And the good thing about charter schools is basically it's a trade-off between flexibility and accountability. They're much more flexible than a public school, and so they can focus in on areas. Charter schools tend to be focused more on, say, you might have one that's focused on the arts or one that's focused on science, those types of things. You might have one that's a trade school type of a charter school. And so a child can look at the area of their interest and get plugged into a charter school that fits those areas. They still get a well-rounded education,
sure,
but there's an emphasis on a certain subject matter. So that's the good thing about charter schools. But like I said, flexibility, they get to get into a certain subject more deeply, but also accountability. The good thing about a charter school is they set out a list of goals, and if they don't meet those goals, they get shut down. And that's a lot different than a public school. We have lots of public schools that are underperforming in Montana and across the nation that have been underperforming for years, and there's no accountability there. And so charter schools is a good idea. Another thing that we're looking at now is ways to get kids into private schools that can't get in there now. And so that's not really coming up with a new type of education. What it's coming up with is a mechanism to allow children that may come from homes that are not as well-to-do as others an avenue to get into a private school and get that other education. And so we've got, along that line, we've got, tax credit scholarships. Some people talk about vouchers. That's the big, the big ugly word when you get into the education circles, but there's other states that are doing it. And what a voucher does is it basically takes the cost of an education for a child, divides it by the number of kids, in the state, gives each kid a check for that amount of money, and says, go off out into the range of possibilities and find the educational institution that works best for you. And countries do this. Australia does this, but we don't do it here in the United States yet. Like I said, there's some states that are starting that. Another thing that we've got is virtual schools, and we can talk about virtual schools. Amazing. Right now we're educating kids in the public schools in the 21st century using 19th century technology. It's a shame, but there's schools around the United States now that are figuring out that there's a 21st century model out there that we can tap into and get kids an education that's customized just for them.
Sure.
They can go at their pace. They can focus on those things that they want to in a larger class setting like they're used to. It's working fantastically well, and so we need to look at some of those things for Montana.
That's neat. Well, I'm totally on board with you. My son went to charter school when we were in Arizona. We've been up here 3 years now, and he's in private school. But you're right, the choices are very slim here, and the charter schools work really, really well.
They do.
They
do.
work
And
really
like I
well.
said, if they don't work, shut them down. That's the good thing about them, just a high level of accountability that we don't see on the public side.
So just to review, we're looking to try to get the charter schools going.
Correct.
The voucher system, the virtual schooling, and you mentioned one other, didn't you?
Actually, there's a few others. One would be a tax credit scholarship that would allow corporations and individuals to donate money to private tax granting scholarship organizations. They get to take a tax write-off for that, and then that money is used to grant scholarships to kids to be able to go to whatever school they want, whatever private school they want. And so that's another way for kids to be able to move into private schools. Another thing we have is scholarships for kids with disabilities. A lot of times they can't get the help that they need in a certain public school setting, and if their parents had just a little bit of money, they can put them into a private school that focuses maybe on that particular disability and get that child the help that they need. So what we're looking at is a broad array of options. We're putting the responsibility basically back in the hands of the parents and saying, you are the person that loves your child more than anyone else in this world. You go find for them an educational setting that will work for them